And there we go. All right. So, look, political documentaries have been suspect as of late. This is a political documentary, and it's out on VOD now. Gradually, then suddenly refers to a Ernest Hemingway quote regarding bankruptcy. How does one fall into bankruptcy? Gradually, then suddenly. And this refers to in 2013, the city of Detroit declared bankruptcy, went to court, filed for bankruptcy. And this is what, and this documentary goes into the results of that. When Detroit went to bankruptcy, Republican governor at the time enacted, I forgot, emergency manager clause, which meant that that the state of Michigan will now be running the city of Detroit and get its affairs back together. When Detroit fell into bankruptcy, its loans was 13 times its assets. What happened was basically the city of Detroit over decades had been borrowing too much, spending too much, and paying too much for its services. And what this movie does, the heart of this movie is basically Detroit was in such a bad financial situation that no matter what solution they came up with, people were not going to like it. The things that were targeted during the bankruptcy was pensions. Right now, because of because of jobs going away, money going into the pension was not enough to sustain the money going out of the pension. And so drastic changes had to happen. And that affected a lot of frontline people, police officers, firemen, who were retired and were looking forward to the money and realizing that the money wasn't going to be there to help sustain their lives. But again, whose fault was that? The other thing was the city owned the Detroit Institute of Art. Do I have that one right?
Yes, the DIA. I've been there many times, yeah.
So the Detroit Institute of Art, since the start of the city of Detroit, they had been collecting valuable art pieces just over time. They just felt like that culture was important to Detroit. And at the time of the bankruptcy, the city owning the museum's values were in the billions of dollars. And there was just a proposal that said we need to liquidate the museum and pay the pensions and then pay the creditors. And this is where the real compromise came. I mean, this is ultimately what got Detroit out of bankruptcy was compromise. Okay, so watch the documentary, and I'll tell you why you watch the documentary, because it's really balanced. As much as Detroit hates Republicans, Rick Scott's in this one. All the major players are in there. The emergency manager, who is black, is in this one. Critics, supporters of the law, of what happened, are in this documentary, and they're talking frankly about it. I will say the one weakness of this documentary is that at no point does the city of Detroit take accountability for having gotten into this situation in the first place. Look, you got yourself into a bad situation, and now all you're doing, and this is plainly clear in the documentary, you got yourself in the situation, and now you're complaining and complaining and complaining about the solution because you know that solution is going to be hard. And for some reason, people who are going to be impacted by this most, it's like, do whatever you have to do, but don't do anything to us. And there just has to come a point where everyone has to come together and say, we all need to take the hit. And that's why I really like this documentary, because I think it's as balanced as you're going to get for a political doc. You came from Detroit.
Well, I have thoughts. I have not seen this doc.
Okay.
But now I really want to see it. I've been to the DIA, the Detroit Institute of Arts. I've been to the museum. Amazing museum. Great culture. My introduction to going to see movies, indie movies, was at the DIA. They had a film series. I saw She's Gotta Have It, Spike Lee, Stranger Than Paradise, Jim Jarmusch. My early indie introduction to indie film was through the DIA. in the 80s. I lived in Detroit in the 80s, and there was an area that a friend of mine lived called the Cass Corridor. It was the most crime-ridden area of Detroit, like Hell's Kitchen in New York, right? It's the Cass Corridor was awful. My car got broken into, I don't know, 4 or 5 times. I realized I could only I left things on the front seat. Well, of course, break in a window, steal my stuff. The only thing I could reliably leave in my car, visible and not get stolen, were books. I witnessed the horrible decline, and it started with the riots in the 1960s. That's when it began and just eroded from there. Eventually, my apartment got broken into. I lost everything I owned. And I literally, in my early 20s, moved into my mother's basement to live and, build back money so I could get back on my feet. It was sad. And then I moved to California. I just said, I can't thrive in this town. I have to get out of here. 1989, I moved from Detroit to Los Angeles. Anyways, I've seen the decline. I've seen so many abandoned buildings, and it's not gotten better. I know there is an arts community there that's tried to thrive, but I mean, if you come from Detroit, anyone I meet from Detroit, they're tough.
Yeah.
And there's I like to say I have a highly tuned bullshit detector whenever I meet Hollywood people, because I can tell when they're full of shit. It's my Detroit, I don't know. It's something in me from Detroit that I can't get out of me. So I'm really fascinated with this. I feel sad. A lot of it is cultural and bad decision-making and a lot of divisive politics. Coleman Young was the mayor of the town when I lived in the area, and he just did not bring unity. That's what I'll say. So I'm really fascinated.
And I'm sure his office looked immaculate.
Yeah, it was great, I'm sure. But yeah, thank you, Alan, for this review. It makes me want to see the movie. I appreciate that.
Yeah.